It's live. We are live. Can you see us? Anybody in the room who could go on the live?
I think she might be checking it.
I mean, I can see you.
Yeah, but you're on Zoom.
This is true.
Yeah. She's nearby.
Great. We are live.
Yes.
Yeah,
The live.
thank you so much. Room for your time. Takes a village.
Okay, well, last I knew we were just going through if there were any other changes people wanted to see, and you know, that's
So we
Yeah.
were at the bottom of page 6 talking about line 18. And I think Efficiency Vermont wanted to add some information to clarify for us.
Yeah, this is Kelly Lucci with Efficiency Vermont. I was just naming that if you wanted to streamline the language and just say all fuel sources, that would be consistent with, how we think of these fuel sources. Electricity is a fuel, right? That's how we manage our budgets now.
right. Okay, that's great. Any other places that people want to go back to revisit, make edits?
Well, I'll ask you, just a reminder, really, it's not my own question per se, but why didn't we take out fuel storage? Why didn't we take out storage? That's what I know you wanted
I
to
think
see, but I can't remember why.
The distribution utilities had concerns about it because they manage the storage capacity and they thought it was not appropriate
Okay,
for Efficiency Vermont to have.
okay.
You know, I will raise this one other idea, just that has come up in conversation, and I'm not ready to like propose a change to this yet, but I mean, one of the other complaints that we've heard is around, I guess I'd call it like the potential impacts to ratepayers, and I think that is linked to if you. Let me. I'm the point I'm trying to make is like a little bit nuanced, but if you can follow me here for a second, the if we were able to do more beneficial electrification, that does not negatively. My understanding is that that does not negatively impact rates, right? Because more electricity, more people are paying in. That's a good thing. But for something like weatherization, where you're using electric money basically for something that doesn't have an electric impact, that may be something that we want to consider to reduce the rate pressure. Is this making sense? Does this point make sense? If not, that's okay.
No,
I'm not yet, but are you pointing to something in the bill specifically?
Well, so when we talk about reducing greenhouse gases, just generally, that could be beneficial electrification. You know, things like EVs or heat pumps, or even geothermal. You know, it's something like that. But if it's if it's something like weatherization, then that those other things I mentioned, those increase electric consumption. But weatherization, just as an example, does not increase electric consumption, and so it doesn't contribute to the downward pressure on electric rates, if that makes sense. And so I'm just going to speculate out loud here about the possibility of keeping beneficial electrification in there, but is it I don't know if this is a good idea yet. I'm just gonna float it out there that we could conceivably limit it to things that do contribute to more electricity consumption. So so that, you know, this argument about the pressure on rates, goes away, or is at least limited.
You can't see it, we have a question over here.
Oh, okay, if there's a question.
I just wanted to, this is Kelly Lucci with Efficiency Vermont again. I just wanted to name that you do also have a provision in this language that caps the collections from the electric revenue that flows into the budget, which is also a limiting factor in terms of raising rates.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's something that I just want to be conscious of, and how we're managing that. So, okay. Anything else, team?
But
Yeah.
we're not voting this out today, right? We can.
No, definitely not.
Okay, all right, okay.
No, and I'm gonna make 2 small edits for the next version.
Oh, like typo stuff?
No, sorry, we talked about earlier, still on page 6, Senator Party proposed,
Oh, yeah.
on line 16, striking the second shall and making it an and, just so that I read a little more clearly, and then I'm gonna strike electric, fossil, and biologic fuel on line 18, so that I just read all fuel sources.
Right, great. Perfect. All right, super. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, and now we're going to be mentally nimble here and switch gears to S57 and welcome Mr. Poor.
Good morning. Thank you. Chair, you're behind me, so I apologize. Well, actually, you don't have to look at the back of my head. Let's see. People in there. For the record, TJ Poor, Director of Regulated Utility Planning at the Public Service Department, and here today to talk about S57, the expansion of the standard offer program bill. I thought I'd change it up today and not have a bunch of slides for you to look at. And I can provide some written testimony to you, what I'm gonna say after the fact here. But what I plan to do, I think you have had enough of kind of the overview of what the standard offer is and the history of it. So I'm just gonna jump right in and describe what I feel is that, and the department feels like, are the pros and cons of the standard offer program. There are, you know, good things and bad things about it. Really describe why I don't believe it's necessary to reauthorize it right now. And then discuss the community solar component of the program and why we believe that the department's proposed renewable energy for communities program is a better alternative than it's in S57 for now. So I'm going to start with the good things, I think, the pros of the standard offer program that I see. One, it provides an opportunity for developers that can get in the game, right? Without something like the standard offer, and aside from net metering, utilities would need to contract, or developers would need to contract with utilities, and that can be limiting in terms of who might establish themselves in Vermont as a developer that could provide good service. You know, under the standard offer, developers don't have to negotiate that PPA with, you know, for the most part, Green Mountain Power, both in the state. Developers would have a known solicitation with known contract terms. But similar to what you heard yesterday from Mr. McNamara, I believe there are other mechanisms possible to do kind of the known solicitations with at a certain time certain. And so, but that is really a good thing. This you know, a pro of the standard offer, that opportunity for new developers. The second, in theory, the solicitation secures resources at the lowest price, right? These solicitations have been really successful. You've heard that the prices are in the 8 to 9 cent a kilowatt hour range in the last solicitation as we move along. That is a good thing. I do want to note that we should not expect those prices to continue. I think there has been some comparison of that 8 cent power to recent utility PPAs, which are somewhat higher than that. But there's, a lot of things that have happened since 2022 in the industry and world, global events that would drive the prices higher than that 8 cent range. And so it's still a good thing, that kind of solicitation process, competitive bidding process. We can get there in other ways as well. So those are good. You have heard also that it provides a useful data point. That is true, right? Like, it's good for the state to have a kind of a public process that has a good data point that we can reference. But again, I think there are other ways for us to get that data point. The industry is in a lot different, solar industry, electric industry, much different place than it was 10, 12 years ago.
Can I ask a question, Anne? Sorry,
Sure,
it's
yes.
awkward to, can you just back up for just a second, because I'm trying to, in my head, reconcile what you're saying with what Ed McNamara said yesterday, I think it was yesterday, about the rates. Because I thought he said that the standard offer rates were higher. And not what I just heard you say was that they are lower in a good deal. I'm confused.
I listened to his testimony. I was in the car yesterday, so I did not hear him say that they were
Okay, I
higher.
could miss.
But I think that they're competitive. They're really competitive. There have been some PPAs that have been signed, purchase power agreements that have been signed that are lower than the standard offer prices, but those are tied to the specific tax credits that are available currently, we think are still available, but may not be available depending on what the federal government does. And some of them actually do look like they're a little bit lower than the standard offer prices with those other tax benefits where you tie that generation to community benefit.
Okay,
And
I thought part of his argument for, I think I wrote down that he thinks we should let the standard offer just basically continue to die its slow death or whatever that, but I thought one of his arguments was that the rates under the program were higher, but it sounds like no, and I must have misunderstood.
well, I think I also am gonna get into the rates may not reflect all the costs that are associated with the program.
Oh,
And so-
the building costs of whatever
Right, so
project.
where its location is, and then the administrative costs associated with running the program.
Okay, so it's more new.
They're in, right,
Okay,
right, so when you just look at what that contract price is for, say, those have been really good rates in the low 8 cent range.
okay, okay.
The other thing I'll note though is that those projects in that 8 cent price range, not all of them have been built, right? Our last solicitation is in 2022, and this is kind of a transitioning into some of the cons of the program, is that some of the development timelines can be really slow. Our last solicitation was in 2022. We still have 30 megawatts, so 15 or so projects that have not been built from in 3 years. And what happens in this state procurement is there are some basically prospective bids, right? You throw in a price that you hope will win, and then you go find the financing. Then you go like dot your I's and cross your T's. And in the past, prices have continually gone down, and that has created, developers were able to get that financing and secure their transformers and the equipment that they need to do. And I think one of the reasons that we're seeing that there's still 30 megawatts that haven't been developed is because, supply chain difficulties, transformer prices have gone up. We have, just inflation, just net, all the things we hear about all the time about the economy has changed, right? And driven prices up, and those projects are having a hard time getting from submit a bid at 8 cents to actually construct it. And so that kind of prospective bidding is it served Vermont well, actually, for 10 years, right? But we're not in the same place that we were, and it's a lot more challenging for those projects to actually happen. And a utility,
Sorry,
Uh,
can I
yeah.
interrupt you? Because I have a question on that point. One of the things I heard Mr. McNamara say yesterday was that the prices were particularly low because of all the the things that were happening sort of externally to Vermont, I suppose, right? That there were it was just a more competitive, like there were just a lot of like federal supports for solar at the time, and those don't exist now. But I guess my question is, given that the world is different and we would expect the rates to be higher, doesn't this reverse auction still present a benefit, given the world that we're in now? It would still potentially drive down rates, given our current circumstances. It may, maybe we don't achieve 8 cents, but maybe it's lower than it otherwise would be. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I actually think that the standard offer program, when we put it in place in 2012 and through now, it has been a success in really helping. At 2012, we didn't have that visibility, as much visibility at that point. We didn't have kind of this mechanism to procure that cheaper power outside of the utilities. We didn't have a renewable energy standard at the time that was actually driving them to procure renewable energy. But so going forward, yes, the reverse auction could still, even if it's higher than 8 cents, get a lower a low price. But I think you still see those prospective bids in there that maybe we still see a bid at 8.5 cents or 9 cents or 10 cents, but those are still prospective bids, and maybe they can or can't build those. And my point here is really that utilities can actually better vet the viability of those projects than the state can. So utilities aren't just contracting with the same person; they're going out to bid as well and getting kind of the reverse, essentially getting a competitive process in order to secure who might they contract with. And I think you're still getting the benefit of that, except with utilities, they're able to say, here is where the project is best suited for the grid to provide us the most benefit. And by the way, we can vet your financial viability more than the Public Utility Commission can, of your history, your financing mechanism. We can, that can be in place. Your assumptions on like what you're assuming for your transformer costs, all of that. They're much more suited to understanding what those costs will be and vetting those, whereas the commission's process is put in the price and you get the contract with the price. Now, you could layer in some of those things for the state process, right? But I think the utilities are better suited to actually do that because they procure power every day, right? They're doing it on a daily, monthly, and annual basis, and they're just better suited to vet those types of contracts than state government is. Was that responsive to your question? I can't see you, so.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, that was helpful. I think, yeah, it answered my question and then some, so that was good. So thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Keep going, I'm mulling a question, I'll ask eventually.
Okay, so I kind of flowed into some of the cons of the standard offer program. Those development timelines were one. I did mention the locational component to the standard offer program. The developers do pay that initial interconnection cost, right? But the program itself, as it is right now, is not designed to put generation resources on the grid where they're most beneficial. And This could have some downsides. It could have kind of a tragedy of the commons type of implications where after some time a transmission upgrade is necessary that all ratepayers need to pay for in order to get power out. Some utilities who have kind of more than their fair share of the standard offer charge to other utilities. They wheel the power is the term of art to get the power out of their system into the system to which the power is allocated. So there's some like cost shifting between utilities that happens. Or it could just be an economic issue where these plants are on and they're kind of must run plants when the power is there, they put juice into the system. And that could ultimately eat into the benefits of other renewable generation that are on the system. Like you've heard of the Sheffield Highgate export interface Shiite area, and that's what happens there. Less so now because we socialized and built some transmission. But new projects coming online were causing projects that had already been online that were owned by utilities, namely Kingdom Community Wind and Sheffield Wind Plant, to have to be curtailed. And that was a cost to ratepayers. And so I'm not saying like those are just some potential risks, I will say. They're not like definite down, will happen, but they're risks and they have happened in the past.
Those wind projects were standard offer projects?
Those wind projects were not standard offer.
Oh,
So those were the projects that were built in the 2010 timeframe. They're bigger, they're 40 or 60 megawatts and under the STEED program. Which was way back.
Okay.
Okay, the last thing in terms of cons are just really the administrative costs. Chair McNamara addressed these, so I won't go into great detail, but there's a cost to manage the solicitations for the state. $600,000 a year right now is what that cost is. Now, that cost will not go away with the standard offer stop solicitations, just to be clear, like it may be lessened, but the current projects still need to be managed through their life. So I don't want to say.
You don't want us to cut your budget then? Right?
Oh, it doesn't come through it do not want you to cut our budget, but this does not come through the general fund. It just gets paid for through the cost of standard offer by the utilities. I just want everybody to be aware there is an administrative cost associated with the program. $600,000 a year for 10 years, $6 million. That starts to add up. And then Chair McNamara mentioned the litigation. He has to deal with this a lot more than the public service department, but just even though we are parties to those cases, so it's not a zero cost, but the commission really is the one that has to defend their orders in the Supreme Court and all this litigation, and it is not an insignificant cost. And that doesn't. I do also just want to mention that there is, because of the lack of a locational component, that some of that litigation does flow down to towns and regions as well. We at the department aren't super involved in that litigation per se, but it is an impact to Vermont that it continues to happen.
But to be fair, there's litigation on things that are not standard offer projects. I mean,
Agreed.
I think that's across all kinds of energy projects. They just can be controversial depending on where they're cited. So it's not just.
Agreed. For the town and regional siting, I think
Yeah.
that is a fair point. I think that what Chair McNamara was talking about yesterday was the litigation relative to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and how the commission effectively sets rates through the program through this auction, and that there are potential conflicts with federal law that get litigated, and that is a lot different than the specific citing type of litigation. So,
yeah.
So as it relates to the standard offer program, we don't see the need to reauthorize it right now, where the negatives really, in our opinion, outweigh the positives. We just revised the renewable energy standard last year to increase the amount of renewables. And we're in a much different place than we were a decade ago, so we feel like we should let that play out a little bit and see how this goes. If we start to see the need for another entry point for developers, maybe it could be revisited in the future, but we need to, we just passed a law last year, we should see what that, if there is a need for this going forward. The utilities are better able to encourage projects in the areas of the grid that are most beneficial. And they also use that solicitation process oftentimes and should also lead to the lowest prices. The utilities also are able to build projects at the pace necessary to meet the renewable energy standard requirements. So if we have a regular solicitation at 20 megawatts every year for 5 years, well, we don't know, we may be in a high price time right now with a projection that maybe in a couple of years that prices will come down more. And maybe the inverse, maybe we should solicit more now. The utilities should be able to best manage the pace of that. And so us putting in like this 20 megawatt a year pace, I think you heard from Mr. Walsh that right now the utilities, because they kind of over procured over the last several years for the old renewable energy standard, have a little runway in order before they absolutely have to build new generation in order to meet the requirements. Well, we assign utilities responsibility for least cost planning so that they can manage the pace of their procurements. This takes away some of that responsibility, and when we have that runway, we really are we're telling them to procure now. That may not be the best time to procure. So having that flexibility is a benefit to the utilities, how they meet the renewable energy standard. Okay, so again, we just right now, we don't think it's the time or it's necessary to reauthorize the standard offer program. So I want to stop there for a sec before I transition to the community solar component, because I think that's a really important idea and concept that's in the bill. But let's see if there's questions on the first part. Okay. So community solar. All right. So it's not stated in the text of the bill, but when the bill was introduced to the committee, it was introduced as a way to provide a successor opportunity for community solar. After last year, the legislature in Act 179 chose to end virtual group net metering, which was the primary mechanism for community access. Act 179 also tasked the Department of Public Service with to come up with a replacement program or successor for group net metering. And then I just want to quote the language here: discuss and prioritize recommendations for replacement programs based on how they would impact Vermont's impacted and frontline communities. And that was with a focus on affordable housing and manufactured home communities, among other requirements. We did that in the report that was delivered to committee on January 15th. And I'll get to what's in that report in one sec. But the bill, as I understand it, would allocate 2 megawatts per year as community solar projects, with the only definition of those projects being that they're owned or controlled by their members, its members. That definition is really broad, and it sounds like it could be any member, even if that member was a large corporation or anybody. And it doesn't do anything to try and direct any benefits or access to the most vulnerable Vermonters, or manufactured home communities, affordable housing communities. And it's possible that the projects end up serving higher income communities under the bill it's written, those that have the wherewithal to respond and get together and move forward. And just as a reminder, when there's a cost, I think it was talked about by everybody that agrees that this would cost more than kind of just a straight solicitation for standard offer or even a utility solicitation. When there's an additional cost above that market rate, all electric ratepayers will pay for that, and there's no offsetting cost containment mechanisms at all associated with it. And so that is a concern because it creates it creates costs without any sort of clear objectives, definition of impacted communities, or certainty that they will be the ones that receive any benefits. It doesn't really clearly provide any community access to renewables. So I hope, I know I don't have a whole lot of time, but so I hope that the committee takes some time to review the Department's Act 179 report that proposes the Renewable Energy for Communities program. That is contained as part of what is now H289, and I was told that there's a Senate companion bill. If it's not out, it is coming. I also was told that several weeks ago, so that is what it is. But that bill has a lot of stuff in it. I just want to speak to the community renewable energy for communities program, and just if you can just today at least isolate that part of it in your mind. Because I think that part is really important. And I do want to also give accolades to Dr. Claire McElvinney, who's our data and equity program manager, who took the limited time allotted to the department to produce what's really a really good report after a really great process. She would be here to talk about it today, but she's on a much deserved vacation. Do I have 5 minutes still we started a little bit late. I don't know if I still have 5 minutes to talk about the Act 179 report at all.
Yeah, I would love for you to do that, and I realize that's cutting into potential other testimony, but I think we can also consider having a slightly shorter break. So I'm not too worried. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the core recommendation from the report, which is also rolled into H289, is for the legislature to direct the Public Utility Commission to implement the RE4C or RE4C program, Renewable Energy for Communities program, and to implement cost containment mechanisms associated with in other areas to pay for it. So the program itself would require utilities to issue periodic and regularly scheduled solicitations for community benefiting renewables to support meeting their distributed generation requirements. So we are asking for a PUC process to design the details of this program. And those details are really what criteria would the PUC evaluate projects or what criteria should utilities evaluate projects under for this program. So the PUC would say, issue those regularly scheduled solicitations, right? That was one of the benefits of the standard offer program for community renewables. And these are the criteria that you should consider while for community benefit. Now, we provide a bunch of examples of what those could be, but really the important thing is that there's actually a transparent process on the record before the Public Utility Commission to determine exactly what those should be. Examples would be kind of who benefits from the project, where the location is, whether it's taking into account grid constraints, or maybe it's a municipally identified preferred site, like a community input or ownership of the proposal. What it does for local workforce development and what the cost is. So just kind of examples of those things. Really would offer flexibility for utilities and the ability to offer innovative approaches to deliver benefits to communities. And remember, this is as we think about this is a community access program, right? It's access to renewables and the benefits of renewables. Not necessarily, that can coincide with how we meet our renewable energy standard targets. So what types of communities? Well, that's again, some examples of those: Vermonters with low income, affordable housing, manufactured home communities. You know, those are things that were identified in the last bill for us to look at, and we think those are good things. Vermonters that rent, schools, municipalities, et cetera. And then what do we mean by benefits? Things like, well, do they get bill credits or discounts? Does it provide some sort of community resilience? Like, is it paired with storage, or is it a microgrid? You know, are lease payments going to the town? Are there other community benefits that can be quantified that can help in the evaluation? The other recommendations associated with it are really how to pay for it, and they're kind of on the supply side. I'm gonna wait to talk about those another time, because I think that we could spend a lot of time on those things individually as well. The last thing I just want to say about the Act 179 report is that we collectively had a process where we didn't have much time, but we did host a 3-part meeting series with a number of partners who helped connect communities with renewable energy. It included Renewable Energy Vermont, included entities like the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, BNRC and VCAN, Vermont Law School, Vermonters for a Clean Environment. We had some developers, we had VHFA, and we invited members of the legislature. And so there's not everybody we invited was able to participate. There's a short time frame. We didn't have super flexibility, but we did things like defined core terminology, like what do we actually mean by frontline and impacted communities for this type of program, the types of impacts that the program might have, from like economic to social to environmental. And then we looked at kind of the programs that are out there, community solar, both in the state and outside. And then we looked to define what should the objectives be of a community solar program. And ultimately, we came up with reducing energy burden, reducing operating costs of buildings, encouraging electrification, and importantly, connecting communities with solar. And that last one, creating a community asset that provides those benefits that I just talked about. So with that was about 5 more minutes. I think I'm good. I should probably stop.
Do we have time for a question, Ann? Senator?
Yeah, sure. And I have questions too, but go right ahead.
Oh, no, you can go.
Well, I appreciate being able to talk through this, because sometimes these programs, it's sometimes hard to know just from reading it, like how it works. So so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So it is a proposal that the PUC would develop a I think a rubric is probably too strong a word, but some kind of a process for evaluating projects, looking at a variety of potential benefits.
Right, so yes, so they would say, okay, utilities, you need to go solicit X amount of power, whatever, or you need to solicit, create community benefits associated with a certain amount of renewable energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, here are the criteria by which you will determine if this has community benefit.
And that is subsidized by income on the basically like funding on the supply side. Is that correct?
So those additional costs associated with that solicitation, like above market or whatever benefits they're delivering to certain communities, are going to be costs that all other ratepayers pay. The other components of what we proposed, which I have not talked about, were the mechanisms to help pay for that.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Senator Hardy.
Thanks. First of all, I'm trying to find the report that you're referring to, and I see 3 reports on our page.
It's under reports.
Yeah, I'm looking at the 3 reports.
So on the statements, we don't post all of them.
Oh, you don't post all of them, it's just on the, okay, I'll have to find it.
I can send it.
Or would you mind sending it? That would be great. Cause I wanna see how you lay it out in on the paper, but one of the things that I think is really important about the community solar programs that I'm familiar with, and I mean, I know Acorn Energy is where, the ones I'm most familiar with, is that there's really a sense of community empowerment around them and community ownership around them. And I fear that that would be really lost if it's a utility directed kind of thing. Nothing against utility still, and I see you sitting right there, but I think it's this sense of, like, we did this and we own this and we built this kind of feeling that I think would be lost, and so I would really want to have mechanisms to be able to maintain at least some of that community empowerment and, like, we really created our own energy.
I completely agree with you. When we did, in 2023 and a little before that, our broader community engagement, that community access and the desire for that feeling that you're talking about, that ownership, that connection with their power supply, really came through in that engagement. And that is what we heard, one of the things that we heard directly from Vermonters in that engagement. And we, in designing this program, carried that through in the meeting series we had here, and we think in the proposal, and if we didn't, then I appreciate your feedback on that, because that is really one of the core reasons to even do this, right? Because we're getting to the renewable energy standard requires us to be 100% renewable anyway. And so everybody's power is clean. So we're not doing it for emissions reasons. We're doing it to have that ownership, that sense of pride, that connection with your energy resource.
Right, I mean, it's like a basic human need, it's like, Vermonters' connection with the land and growing their own food and, that kind of thing, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like this self-determination that I think is part of the Vermont culture in a lot of ways, and I think getting rid of that part of it would be a huge, huge loss, so I wanna read what your proposal is, I haven't seen it yet, so.
I will follow up directly with the written version of what I just said in the report.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Super. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing up the Re4C program. Interested in looking more into that. Super. All right. So we are moving on to hear from Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Okay.
Good morning.
I think I said that. Yeah, right. Scared of that. All right, good morning. For the record, Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power. Happy to be here and see you all today, virtually as well, Senator Watson. We haven't had a chance to come into this committee yet, but I know the time is short, so I'll skip the just sort of general update from Green Mountain Power, but happy to talk to any of you anytime if you have any questions about work that we're doing. A big focus for us is really around resiliency and reliability, especially in right now our central and southern parts of our territory, where we're working to storm harden the grid, go underground, and get folks connected with other resources as well to kind of enhance their resiliency and reliability in the face of the more intense and increasing storms that we've seen in Vermont. Hopefully this winter has been holding up where a lot of the snow has stayed light and fluffy, but we've certainly seen some outages or wind, and we know that that's just going to continue to happen as well. So happy to come in and talk more about any of that work along the way as well. But today, here specifically to talk about both S57, the standard offer bill, and S65, the energy efficiency bill. I'll start with standard offer since that was where we last left off from TJ, and then circle back to S65. A lot of what we were planning to speak to today, you have heard from, I would say, Mr. Ford as well as Chair McNamara yesterday, which is that, the standard offer was established back in 2009 at a time when we didn't have a renewable energy standard and when the solar industry was very much in development. So projects were more expensive in general, and there wasn't a clear requirement for utilities to procure that power in a different way. And so the standard offer was a way to create that market in this state and sort of create those projects and get folks connected to renewable energy. And it filled that role really well in those early years. I think that there's successes that we can point to for sure. But we have changed a lot since then. And through the work that you all have done over the past 15 years or so, created those requirements in the renewable energy standard in the form of our tier 2 requirement specifically that directs utilities to procure distributed generation and those projects throughout the state. And last year's renewable energy standard bill really increased that requirement to 20% by 2032 for our overall goal. And we know that we have a lot of work to do to procure that and bring those projects online. As you've heard from prior witnesses on this, that we envision meeting those goals through competitive requests for proposal, RFPs, that really allow us to target where we see those projects best fitting our customers' needs from a cost perspective. And so we're able to direct those solicitations in a way that direct it to locations where we're not going to need those more expensive grid upgrades, locations where we can see how it relates to the work that regional planning commissions have done about locational stuff as well from their planning perspective. And really be more targeted and intentional about that to ensure that those projects actually get built at the cost that works best for customers. One of the challenges we've seen recently in the more recent past with standard offer projects is that they're just not getting built for a variety of reasons that you've heard from other witnesses. And our goals from tier 2 are pretty aggressive, and we need to make sure that the projects that we're matching in that space actually come online and start delivering those benefits to customers in the time that we need to meet those obligations. So the being able to kind of direct and work with developers to make those projects happen in a way that we can be certain that they're going to come online is a key thing for us, which is why, standard offer as a program, like I said, worked well before, but expanding that and sort of creating this other process at this time is, we don't think it makes sense for what we're seeing in this space going forward right now. So that's our big picture on that, is that, we're currently working to, and we have an obligation to, through the renewable energy standard, to procure those cost-effective renewables on behalf of our customers. That work is super important, and we'll do it in partnership with developers through different utility focused work. So we're not at this time supportive of extending the standard offer beyond what's already been authorized. We think it creates unnecessary uncertainty and is redundant to some of the other work that's happening in this space. I'm happy to answer any questions on that portion of the morning.
I have,
Yeah, go ahead.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What, do you have a position on the program that we just heard from renewable energy for communities?
Yes, thank you for that. I was gonna get to that part of it too, if we wanted to talk about the community solar. So we were a part of the work that Mr. Ford talked about in terms of the meetings and the process in terms of responding to this request from the legislature last year. I think that program has a lot of merits, as Mr. Ford mentioned. It really ties and creates some of that evaluation criteria for types of projects that feel more connected to the communities and sort of hit a lot of that. We'd be happy to take a look at language or come back and talk about that program more specifically if you all choose to advance it too. But we do think that directionally is a more consistent approach with a community solar program than what's before you in S57.
Okay,
Ask you a question
Oh, sure.
about, are you going to speak to the community solar aspect that's in the bill at the moment?
I'm happy to speak to it a little bit more. I think I would share some of the questions that Mr. Poor had as well about kind of the words on the page, leave a lot of room to understand sort of who would get connected to those projects and whether or not it actually, I think sort of is consistent with what the other folks envision for community solar projects. So pulling in some of the criteria that you'll see when you take a look at the RE4C program, that approach I think is more consistent with what I've heard from folks on community solar than what's before you in S57.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm also happy to talk about, I mean, one good thing too is that we at Green Mountain Power have worked with the department in a program called ACRE, which I don't know if you all have heard about yet, but it's the Affordable Community Renewable Energy Program. It was ARPA funded. And that was through that grant from the department, we were able to have a solar project come online and get connected. It's about 1,200 of our customers right now to a direct bill reduction on their energy statements. And so they're connected to a new renewable energy project that doesn't have to be co-located with them. And they're able to see that benefit on their bills every month. And so that was a good way to connect some of our income eligible customers who might not otherwise have the ability to access solar, either through capital challenges or ownership of their building challenges, or they're not well suited for lots of different reasons. And so that is a good way for us to continue to offer those benefits to eligible customers as well right now. And we've also stood up what we're calling our shared solar tariff program as well, which connects projects developed by renewable energy developers who are able to access the bonus investment tax credit. And those projects and those benefits can also flow to income eligible customers through the tariff framework that we have established. And so those projects are also starting to come online. We can see a benefit of up to hopefully 7,500 customers of ours being able to get some of those direct bill credits as well, because they're connected to those projects that are being stood up and developed in that space too. So I know it's not maybe the same definition of community solar that everyone has, but it's a way to get folks connected to renewable energy projects directly too, which we're happy to have been able to stand that up and continue to see those projects come online. Okay. I will turn now to S65. And I will caveat it with the fact that I have not had a chance to look at the specific language that you all reviewed this morning for some of those revisions. I was able, obviously, to check out the testimony from the last week on that bill, as well as some of the suggested edits from Mr. Watt last Friday in this space. And so I will just caveat that. I will follow up if there are specific areas of focus in the language that you all have before you from this morning. But wanted a chance still to talk just in general about the concepts contemplated in this bill. Overall, we're pleased that the storage and load management components, I think, are out of the current draft before the committee right now. The addition of those into the scope of work from an electric efficiency utility, and sort of what could have been taken away from distribution utilities felt like a real non-starter for us. That's important work that we're doing in connecting with our customers about all the time. We're also, the grid operators and understand what's needed in that space related to load management. We've had good partnership with Efficiency Vermont on some of the flexible load programs that we've stood up to date, where they're providing the incentives for companies to bring that flexible load device that we're been able to control and manage the grid in an effective way. That kind of partnership happens right now, doesn't need a law change. And so focusing or taking that stuff out of the bill draft felt like an important step for sure. So we appreciate that. In general, though, you've heard a lot of concerns from the Public Utility Commission, the department, and also I think from other distribution utilities over the last week, that expanding the scope of work to greenhouse gas emission reductions and having it continue to be paid for through the electric efficiency charge from electric customers is a really tough conversation to have right now without a further evaluation of the broader landscape and the work that's happening out there, as well. I know there's some provisions, I think, that have been added related to kind of protecting what that charge amount would be or what the budget would be. And that is certainly a better version too than the earlier drafts, I think, but in general, it's still creating a lot of questions in our mind about what added costs to customers might be if the shift away from efficiency is more focused in the greenhouse gas emission reduction without having a broader conversation about kind of who's paying for that work, and how we're evaluating the success of that work as well.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
I don't know if I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Okay.
It sounds like you're suggesting that we ought to look at other sectors to help pay for that work.
I would say that that's a policy decision and like conversation for the committee. We're not gonna recommend any approach in that space, but it's certainly something that I think is worth looking at, but like I said, more of a policy conversation for you all than something that Green Mountain Power would be recommending an approach to.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I'm a little confused, cause I think that what my understanding, what Efficiency Vermont does right now is actually a combination of, you know, electric efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction, and a lot of their projects do both already. And this is just making it a little bit more explicit, and that, I mean, Senator Beck and I were in the finance committee yesterday, and we got this testimony from this company that's working with schools to do a lot of energy efficiency work and sort of revamping all of their systems to make them better, and the results of their work are pretty impressive, and they work with Efficiency Vermont, and I think in a lot of cases, you and other utilities. So, and the goals of their work was multifaceted, you know, it was energy efficiency, it was greenhouse gas reductions, it was healthier schools, it was all this stuff, and it just seems to me like what the bill is attempting to do is say, hey, all of that's good. This is a pot of money we have that can do all of those things. And it's not changing the focus on energy efficiency. It's just being honest about the fact that a lot of the stuff is multifaceted. And there are, you know, provisions in place to make sure that that charge doesn't go up.
Sure.
So, I mean, it seems like you all benefit from it too, just from a utility perspective, being able to get those projects done in partnership. So, because I'm not quite understanding where the objections are.
Okay, no, absolutely, I'm happy to unpack it a little bit further, and also happy to follow up after we've had a chance to thoroughly review the current version too. So I will say, we absolutely do work in partnership with Efficiency Vermont, and we work really well with them while we're trying to find ways to deliver, you know, whether it's incentives to customers or heat pump installation or custom measures that we work with them on, like for businesses and schools, you know, based on kind of what their needs are. And so there is a lot of that happens already, and a lot of that is governed by, you know, our tier 3 agreements with Efficiency Vermont in terms of kind of who is getting the greenhouse gas emission reduction credit, who's getting some of the efficiency or thermal efficiency credits. I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert in terms of all of the different regulations that Efficiency Vermont has to go through. I know they have a lot in terms of how they're tracking their progress and how they're meeting their goals as well in the current space. And so I do realize that a lot of it is that things have gotten maybe a little bit more murky in terms of the type of projects that the folks are working on, and having that clarity and certainty around what they're able to do could be appreciated for sure. That being said, I think even though the language in there kind of creates like a cap in terms of what that efficiency charge looks like, I think it's also a conversation that we should be having about whether or not it should be reduced over time as we're looking for having folks to electrify and put more into their electric charge and usage. They're paying more right now in their bill for their efficiency charge just by using more if they're electrifying for their thermal or transportation space as well. And so that conversation is absent from this bill and this discussion too, but I think it's worthwhile to have as we move into a more electrified future for a lot of this work as well. I know over time that will make the charge go down, but for this moment in time right now, you know, folks that are early adopters, folks that are even now a little bit more or past the point of early adoption, they're paying additional costs every month by using more electricity for their thermal or transportation needs too. So I'm not saying, like I said, I think hopefully we can have a conversation about what that long-term like role for efficiency Vermont and all of us is in this space. But I think there's a lot of potential for unintended consequences in the bill right now, and we want to understand that more before we could be comfortable with it in its current form.
Can I follow up on that? I don't know if you have something specific in mind when you say unintended consequences. I'm wondering if there's or like what you might have behind that statement.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up after I've had a chance to read the version that you all are seeing today, because we haven't had the chance to look at that and see what was captured in that version versus what was proposed by Mr. Watt last week and what was in the bill as introduced. So I can follow up with that specifically. I think in general, though, it's just that we want to make sure that we understand what our obligations are, what efficiency Vermont's obligations would be in this space, and kind of how, what we're asking from folks in terms of how we're paying for that work as well. But I'm happy to follow up after we've had a chance to review the version that was before you this morning.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's perfectly fair.
Back on schedule.
Yeah.
Good job.
So any further questions for Candace? So I do want to just to ask one further question. You know, so I want to make sure that I'm understanding your main objection at this point, and is it mainly the risk of unintended consequences?
That for sure is, you know, front and center for us. We want to make sure that our customers are understanding the cost that they will be paying for and obligated for. And want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up in a different path that, you know, could increase costs over time. I think the other part of it is just, you know, kind of that broader question of who is covering the cost of this energy transition and how that's getting paid for. And having it continue to be through the electric efficiency charge also feels like a conversation that we should have before we kind of set ourselves down this path.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And so we're going to move on to Dan. I don't know if I don't think I see him in the room.
I don't think I see him. Oh, here he is. Right on
I was
schedule.
watching along.
Welcome.
Here it is. I should still look this way, even though hands flying, right? Okay. Behind your over at Judy's computer.
I'm gonna need to stand up, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Should I just go?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Thanks.
I mean, unless do you I assume you know everybody, or we could do some introductions.
Yeah, he's been in before.
Yeah.
You know everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go right ahead.
Thanks, Chair Watson. For the record, I'm Dan Fingus, Executive Director of the Vermont Conservation Voters. I want to thank Chair Watson and the whole committee for inviting me to testify today on S57 and for the work you all are doing on this important committee. Vermont Conservation Voters works to make environmental protection a top priority for elected officials, candidates, and voters. VCV was founded in 1982 and works to elect environmentally friendly candidates to public office and then holds elected officials accountable for the decisions they make affecting our air, water, wildlife, land, communities, and health. I'm also here representing our strategic partner, Vermont Natural Resource Council. Through research, education, and collaboration, advocacy, VNRC protects and enhances Vermont's natural environments, vibrant communities, productive working landscapes, rural character, and unique sense of place, and prepares the state for the future challenges and opportunities. One of the main energy projects of the VNRC is supporting the Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network, which is a network of over 150 town energy committees across Vermont. VCAN supports energy committees in all 14 counties and all 5 of your districts. The VCAN network works with these 150 plus energy committees in leading a powerful grassroots response to the pressing need to be more energy efficient and generate more in-state renewable energy while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We regularly work with these committees on webinars, trainings, discussions, and our annual conference. The views and needs of these local committees and their communities help guide my testimony today. While I'm here to represent VNRC, if the committee needs more information from VNRC after today's testimony, both Executive Director Lauren Hurl and Energy and Climate Program Director Johanna Miller will be available after this week if you need further testimony. I'm here to share Vermont Conservation Voters and VNRC's support for S57, an act relating to the standard offer program. The bill is crucial to ensuring that we have a pathway to cost-effective solar and community solar. An updated standard offer program will allow Vermont to have both predictable and affordable electricity for Vermonters. Last year, we saw the passage of a modernized renewable energy standard, and that process was very focused on cost containment, and the standard offer builds on those efforts to ensure affordability. Standard offer and its use of a reverse auction mechanism has a history of delivering cost-competitive projects. Since 2019, every standard offer project has come in below base price, demonstrating the effectiveness of the standard offer program as a mechanism to procure cost-competitive renewable energy. These long-term contracts with level rates are what we need in the solar market. So there's a chart in my testimony that you can find, I'm sure, on your website that covers 28 standard offer projects between 2016 and 2022 that were awarded a contract at 8 long-term utility solar power purchase agreements. Some of these projects may have not made it to construction or still pending, but the data we have shows that standard offer prices are lower than PPAs. Over the course of those 7 years in the 3 dozen projects, only once did a standard offer project cost more than the most cost-efficient utility power purchase agreement project, and that was by less than 0.1 cents a kilowatt hour. The numbers are clear. Standard offer is the most affordable and cost-efficient way to build solar projects in Vermont. One additional way, not in the current bill, that the legislature could ensure affordability is to raise the cap to 5 megawatts, which would make projects more cost effective and would mirror the tier 2 cap in the renewable energy standard, which would help control costs even more. Another benefit to S57 is that it provides predictability for solar developers, which allows them to plan projects and keep costs down, providing a predictable minimum build rate that locals and climate benefits. Avoiding boom or bust contracting cycles and fluctuations in energy pricing is important to our members and supporters. A key part of S57 that our members really care about is that it allows for community solar. Community-owned solar is one of the best ways to make sure everyone benefits from the lower energy costs that solar provides. Historically, virtual net metering provided the sole avenue for community-owned projects. With the phase out of virtual net metering, there is now no mechanism for community ownership. The standard offer program with a standard power purchase agreement and guaranteed off-takers for 2 megawatts a year or 10 megawatts over the 5-year plan would provide a pathway for community solar within a program that has proven to be lower cost than virtual net metering. Lastly, when we think of solar, we mostly think of it as a renewable energy or a forward-thinking solution to climate change, but we need to remember that solar is also an industry with over 5,600 good-paying jobs in Vermont that added between $75 and $100 million to our state economy last year. As we look at how our state can be affordable, we have to look at how we can create more good paying jobs like the electricians who install solar panels. S57 helps us do that. We hope the Senate Natural and Resource and Energy Committee will pass a standard offer bill before crossover this year so that an updated standard offer program can be accomplished this legislative session. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Questions?
I
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
a couple questions.
For sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Deanna. Good night. Sorry, I'm standing up because I fell this morning in my bathroom. So, I wondered what so we just got a bunch of testimony about the sort of, problems with the standard offer, and I wonder if you had any kind of direct, sort of, feedback on that, especially the siting and the, ability for the utilities to manage their load and everything, and how the standard offer program gets kind of in the way of that.
Yeah, well, so I think citing is gonna be, and always a hard conversation, and I think even within our organizations, it's a difficult conversation because we have policy folks who are really focused on getting the, cheapest, best electricity to everyone, and then we have folks that are worried about forest fragmentation and land use, so I think the citing piece is, I imagine we need to look at, I mean, with the new renewable energy standard, we need to look at citing anyway. I don't know if there's like an easy answer to that, other than, we know that there are examples like down in Senator Baumgart's district where a community came together and said that they wanted a solar project in their community, where everyone agreed it should go, and then the PUC ended up declining, they didn't have a vote, popular vote, and the PUC declined it for aesthetic reasons anyway. So I know that there's some problems with siting, and we need to really look at that and figure out ways that we can involve communities in the siting conversations and help communities plan for where they would want solar to be sited in their energy plans. I did hear Chair McNamara yesterday saying that it's hard for the PUC to administer the program. I think one, that the standard offer program in the past has been successful. And also I think thinking about utilities taking on this kind of thing themselves means we're looking at 16 or 17 different entities trying to take on how to meet the solar burden, or the solar benefits. And it really feels like having 16 utilities taking 16 different paths removes all the predictability and also removes the cost efficiency that one statewide system would have. And so I guess I would say that we should be able to figure it out. I mean, this isn't a new process, this isn't a process that only Vermont is engaged in. And so it seems like something that can be achievable for the PUC and for our state.
Okay, and do you have, what are your thoughts on the proposed alternative to community solar that's apparently in the Act 179 report that I have not yet read?
I honestly, personally haven't read that part
Okay.
either. I don't know if Jonathan or others have thoughts on it, but I don't personally have a specific thought
It's
on
the
that.
one that TJ4 was just talking to us.
Okay, I was out in the hall and I couldn't hear his
Okay,
testimony, unfortunately.
Okay, I'd be curious to hear if you guys can.
I'm happy to at least get back to you, Senator Hardy,
Great,
with our
thank you.
thoughts. Yep.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. All right, super. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, and so it is, we are 3 minutes early for our break. That is delightful. So we're gonna take a break until 11:10. All right, so
Wow.
we'll meet then.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Here's our lovely chair. Hi, Dan. All right, well, you know what? You might have to go first because the person zooming in
So where's DC?
has not zoomed in.
No.
Bad stuff. Before you went to hospital.
So, what you you? So, what,
Yes.
check, text your son or wait?
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
but we can start with Senator Tate.
Matters.
Travis, me too.
Well.
Sorry, excuse me.
No, you're totally fine. Totally fine.
Super. Well, let me know when we're live and we'll.
You're live.
Oh, we are live. Fantastic. Okay. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and we are coming back from a break. And we are joined by Senator Chris Matos. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
And you know everybody here, of course.
What's that?
We don't need to do introductions. You know everybody.
I do, yes.
Yes, of course. Okay. Well, and just for context, we have invited you here particularly because you have experience with plowing and salting,
I do.
and so we'd love to get your thoughts on S29.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Senator Chris Matos, Chittenden North. And the chair's correct. I have a property management business. I do plowing and salting in the wintertime. Judging by the snow out there, I probably should have done that this morning, but we're a little better off up in Milton this morning. I read over the bill, and I don't know if I just want to open it up to some questions generally for the committee. I was hoping Mike O'Grady would have been here, but I had a few notes on the bill itself. Just on page 3, line 11, it talks about pedestrians and motor vehicles on traveled surfaces. What is the definition of a traveled surface? Does that include sidewalks for salt best practices? I don't know.
Which line are you on?
11.
He's on.
Cause I'm thinking about it for what I do, you know, where I apply salt is mostly multifamily residential apartments. I don't have big parking lots or anything like that. But what I also do is the driveways, the parking areas and sidewalks of these areas. So I don't know if the bill is just for where vehicles are going or where pedestrians are going as well.
It's both,
So it is the sidewalks.
and parking lots.
Okay.
Yeah, everything.
Cause I was just thinking about it, like sidewalks on some of the properties I have run close to the building. And then snow and ice falls off that building. How do I mitigate that risk of ice and snow on the sidewalk if I'm following a best practice management? And if it's not enough to curtail that icing where that snow falls off. Were just things that start going through my head on. We don't have best practices yet, this bill sets it out, but I was just curious how that would work with like the liability portion of it. In the context of this bill.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean,
Yeah,
my
sure.
understanding after hearing a lot of testimony on the bill is that if you as an applicator do the training,
Yeah.
the state sanctioned training, and you complete it and you pass the little test at the end and you follow the best management practices, you get the liability protections. And presumably the best management practices would talk about how to deal with sidewalks with fall and snow for roofs. So as long as you're doing what you're required to do under the BMPs, then you would have that protection.
Okay, cause I'm just thinking back to the storm we just recently had. One of the properties is right on Route 7. Sidewalk runs across the front of the building. State plows the snow up onto the sidewalk. Town sidewalk plow comes along, plows that snow off, but then plows it into the property sidewalk and the parking lot. So now, like the best weekend, I had to bring my skid steer down and clear out all that snow.
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure like during that meantime, I'm not negligent or anything, but like in the middle of a storm, I can't go clear snow off.
from what the plow did and then the sidewalk plow did. I'd imagine it would still fall within that liability, limited liability for best practices.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah, and that's all,
Let's see.
okay, yeah, cool. I like it, so it does include sidewalks.
Yes.
Excellent. Cause I was just looking through. Cause I, just general overview of the bill. I do often struggle personally about how much salt I should put down based on that liability of having tenants of a building that I'm not managing, but I'm providing services for. Some I manage, some I do just maintenance for. So I do often wonder, am I putting enough salt down? Am I not putting enough salt down? Because some of them then have, you know, inclines, they have grades and tenants complain about not being able to get up those. So if I'm following the rule that would be set forth in this bill, I can't be liable if somebody, I got yelled at last year because somebody drove off into the snowbank because it was slippery. But those are the types of things that are just, if you go through the process of getting certified as a applicator, then you're withheld liable, like if somebody wants to try and have me pay for a tow or they hit a guardrail or something like that, but as long as you're following those best practices, it sounds like you're covered.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing to be clear that I think Senator Williams had a question about was that the liability protection doesn't mean that you can't be sued. What it means is that if you are, your defense is, you know, I follow the best management practices, here's the proof that I did. And
Not
then,
being negligent.
yeah, exactly, so if that's how it works, and Michael Grady can explain that better than me.
Yeah, cause I think about too, like some of my contracts, you know, you have minimums. So you go out at 2 inches, so it was kind of what was going through in my head this morning, there's 2 inches of snow. No, we had half an inch when I was leaving town. But do I need to go salt because it might be slippery under there, like looking at the interstate this morning, there was cars all over the road up in St. Albans area. So those are just the types of things that go through my head is. How is this gonna interact with contracts as well on minimums for people having to go out? Cause I'd imagine that's covered already, if you have a 2-inch minimum. And it's an inch of snow out there, you don't have to go anywhere, so that liability would then fall on the property owner, because that's the contract you have with the property owner themselves.
That is interesting, so you have contracts that are, you know, a certain,
Yeah,
and do you have contracts that tell you how frequently you have to spread salt?
no, I don't explicitly state, I do it based on the conditions of the
Yeah.
road and what the area is, like one property I do has a knoll that goes right over on the driveway, so people can't get up or down either side, and then there's a tight turn up to garages, it's a pleasure to plow. So that one I kind of do. Based on if it's, like a day like today, I went by, it wasn't bad. But earlier on in the winter time when it was colder out, that's a place that I'm gonna probably salt more, because if it's right around that 15-degree mark. If I throw salt down, I'm gonna create more ice by melting that snow and ice that's there, and then it'll freeze.
Yeah.
And then I get into the predicament, well, I just created more ice, so now I gotta throw more salt down to try to do it.
Yeah.
So those, like with this bill, depending on how the course is set up on. Is it gonna be, hey, if it's 10 degrees out, you're not spreading salt, you gotta switch over and spread sand. Or is it gonna be, if it's 30 degrees, you have to spread X amount per square foot? Cause there are ways that I can. My salter on my truck has 10 different levels for how far it throws it and how quick it comes out of the hopper.
Mhm.
So I can do a calculation on, alright, if I run my hopper on speed 5 for 10 seconds, it's gonna spit out X amount of pounds. And then I can figure out how far does it throw it with my spinner, and then that's how much it covers.
You can calibrate it,
You can,
we use that word in the bill.
you can. So I'm not worried about trying to figure out how much I'm actually throwing out there, because I can do the calculation based on that. Right now, it's based on experience and kind of the road conditions. So going through this will help that, but then I also think about my example where I have steep inclines and what happens there. Can you apply more salt because of the incline and the conditions of the road? Probably using it not real big, be my guess.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are, you're more of an expert on that than we are, I would think.
I mean, I know it's a different group of people, but from the testimony we heard from AOT, that their direction to their drivers is use your judgment.
Yeah.
And if you get in situations where you think more salt is necessary, then do what you need to do.
Yeah, I saw that today. I was following a plow truck and the driver was doing the shoulder, plowing the shoulder, didn't have any salt coming out. And then he was coming down the hill and it was probably 50 yards before he was gonna hit a bridge. Or go over the bridge, not hit the bridge itself. Go over the bridge, he flipped this salt up.
Yeah.
We don't know bridges before roads. So it's like that kind of experience where, hey, I'm coming up on a hazard area.
But they can program those salters.
I learned about that.
GPS.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Because they-
Yeah. And AOT already has best practices that are similar to what this does
Oh, okay.
create for private contractors and municipalities. So we got lots of cool testimony from them about what they already do.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about, maybe it was you Senator Becker, Senator Hardy, it was pretty interesting if they had that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then just page 6, kind of that whole A1, the limited liability. I think this might come to my morning committee over in judiciary. My biggest question there is, who is liable? If it's not, the person operating, or the person who owns the property. Who is liable for anything that were to happen following best management practices? And I think that might be a question that we answered down long. And I don't know if you guys took any testimony, talked about it at all on where that liability falls. I know there's the old adage of, I forget, I was gonna ask Rep Sheen what the actual legal term is, but it's when you go out in a winter weather event and you're wearing high heels and you slip and fall, is that on you or is that on the building owner because there's
Well,
2 inches of snow?
I think of it as if everybody did their job correctly, then the liability falls to the individual.
Yeah,
That's what I think of it.
But sometimes there are just people that fall, like me this morning. I literally
No.
fell
oh
coming
no.
to the state house.
So I think that might be a question we talk about more if it does go to judiciary. And then just page 8. Page 8, I'm not a big proponent of mapping where every single privately owned salt storage is. I don't store my own salt because I got somebody in town that I buy from at wholesale, so I just run down the street, grab it, and I'm off on my way. But I'm not the biggest fan of mapping where every private salt shed is.
I think this one,
Unless that got changed, I had 3.3.
yeah, well, there's a proposal for DEC that changes it,
Oh, okay.
isn't that right?
Yeah, we got a weird thing, 3.2, 3.3, we're actually working on a version of 3.2 right now until we,
Oh,
but it's, you wanna look at right there, Chris, but, it looks like the mapping only applies now to, municipal,
oh, okay.
you know,
And the
Yeah,
thing,
state.
yeah.
just talking about covered storage areas. I don't know how many people don't cover their salt or sand. I know if I didn't, like, we had a sand pile that I would grab from. And if it wasn't covered in snow that I could dig out, it would be a brick of ice, but at times, so.
It's more difficult.
Yeah, like what I do when I have leftover salt in my hopper, I have those plastic 275 gallon. Barrels, if you will, cages. And I fill the plastic bin up with my salt, and then I can take my skid steer later and dump it back in my truck, so I just keep it contained to those. In case I somebody shut down. Recently, I just went to get salt. A week ago, week and a half ago, I actually called Senator Beck on it. My local area was out of salt. They had 10 yards of salt left. I go to another place in Essex. They have salt sand and salt. They were shut down for the weekend. They had nothing to sell.
Yeah.
So I tried to keep some in my 275 gallon containers just in case that were to happen like it did a week and a half ago. So those are just some things that I went through. I didn't know if you didn't really know what you wanted me to talk about, but I just read through the bill and had some general questions. I think another one, I don't know if it was changed. Just on page 9, this is 3.3, so it might be a different page, but just the implementation of it. Initial use beginning on January 1st, 2027. Is there any way of backing that up? Because the season that was referenced earlier was October to April. Would it make more sense if we lined it up to October, so it's the beginning of the season? So the October 2026. I don't know.
October to November.
Yeah, so for the initial use starting in October.
Yeah.
October 1st, 20. Oh, wait.
It would be October 1st, 2026, because earlier in the bill, you talk about the. Where is it? Just about what the dates are. It's October to April is what you use for winter maintenance season.
So then we would have to back up the November 1st one.
Yeah.
Well, so that would have to be what, September 1st? Or August 1st, actually.
Yeah. Just a thought, that way you don't have a split season on somebody doing it.
That makes sense.
That's management.
Yeah, that's great. So the other question I have is, as someone who spreads salt, like does this program seem appealing to you?
I think so, because my worry all the time is the road satisfactory to what my client needs? Like, I don't wanna have a contract with a landlord, building owner. And have something fall back on them, and then they come back to me and said, hey, you weren't there, you were supposed to be there. That type of thing. So if it takes the liability off me as a contractor. And also the property owner by doing these best management practices, I think it's a good idea that I would see further. A question that I didn't see in here. Do you have to pay for the course? Is it a course offered by the state for the betterment of water quality in the state?
Yeah.
I
think people get charged.
There would be a fee.
Yeah.
Pay for the program, right?
Yeah,
You have to register every year,
yeah,
so pay a fee. And, to your previous question, talking about, nobody's gonna tell you how much salt to use. So if you think you need, they're primarily concerned with how much you do use,
right,
so. Kind of an equation, how much salt came into the state, how much did we use, and where did we use it?
right. It will be a little bit of a headache, especially when, I got somebody else plowing for me if I was the master applicator. It would be a little bit more work on who's ever plowing for me that day to be able to do the paperwork, but I think the liability that's taken away from you outweighs that little bit of work. And if we do our work early on in the season of calibrating our spreader and knowing exactly how much we're spreading, it's, I'm on setting 5 for my people chain and I'm on setting 6 for my spinner, and I've run it for 12 seconds. I know how much salt I've run at. And I'm all about using less salt because I just paid $168 a yard.
Yeah.
So. I'm definitely interested in hearing more. I'm happy to hear that it might go to judiciary to hear more about this liability portion of it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Super.
Is that
And
any good?
I know it.
So now
Senator,
we have,
right, you're thinking of soon the rest.
excuse me,
Sorry.
we have Keith Williams ready to testify.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we'll transition to Keith. Welcome. And would love to do just a quick round of introductions. Though I suspect you already know one member of the committee pretty well already.
Am I kind of, yeah.
Senator Hardy, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, Keith. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
Morning, Keith.
Hey,
Um,
how's it going?
Ann Wilson.
Seth Waller from the Bennington Senate District.
Bennington. And where were you from?
Sorry, Washington District, and I'm homesick today, so.
Hey, Keith, I'm Scott Beck. I'm from Caledonia.
Okay.
So welcome, and we'd love to hear anything you want to share with us about this bill.
This might be redundant. I'm sure the gentleman you just had speaking probably asked a bunch of questions that I missed. You know, I didn't get in until about quarter after, but my biggest thing is, so I've actually used a lot more salt this year than past because it's been a pretty hard winter, you know, pretty icy, pretty snowy. So I've spent a lot more money. Of course, the price of salt did increase too. So we got to deal with that. But at the expense of trying to keep people safe, that's what you got to do, you know? And like he said, it's all about experience. So the more you do it, the more you know what to do and how much to use and where to use it and so on and so forth. So my question going into this, and I read the bill, of course, I had to read it a couple times because it's written by lawyers, obviously. But is the science telling you guys that your waterways are getting contaminated by this? Is it chlorine?
Yeah, we
Yes.
have had quite a bit of testimony that the chloride levels in lakes and ponds, waterways in general around the state are increasing in chloride, and some are to the level where it's quite detrimental. We have one place in Colchester that's been identified as it's to the point where we got to take some action. And then there's like 3 or 4 other places in Williston that are on their way, but all of the lakes and ponds around the state are showing increased chloride levels.
Okay.
The trend isn't great right now.
So Williston, Colchester, those are northern areas. How about central and southern areas?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The really problematic areas, Keith, are close to where there are lots of parking lots and dense buildings, but it's throughout the state.
Okay. Now, does AOT, do they follow this program already with the type of salt that they're using?
Yeah, they have their own best management practices that they follow, and presumably this is going to be pretty close to that.
So they don't have a lot of chloride in the salt that they use?
Oh no, it definitely does. It's just it's about practices to know like how much to spread, and what's ideally eliminating the pressure to oversalt for the sake of safety. Like if you've spread the correct amount, then and you've gone through this program and you're following best management practices, then you wouldn't be liable for damages that happen as like slip and falls, or like car goes off the road, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. But AOT is not going to have to follow this program, is what my understanding is, right?
So they're following their own best management practices. This is kind of like opening up a training program to people outside. I mean, the municipal roads have their own program as well, and so this is going to be beefing up their program to deal with parking lots, sidewalks, and stuff. So that's I don't know if that helps.
I guess what the question was, does the Agency of Transportation, like the state of Vermont, the orange trucks, they don't have to follow this program? That's yes or no?
No.
No,
Okay.
they already do. They have their own program
Gotcha.
that they follow that's similar to this.
So my next pressing question is, Um, is their salt contaminating the waterways too?
Yes, and that's why they instituted a best management program.
Okay. What other states actually follow this program?
New Hampshire, this program's modeled pretty closely after the New Hampshire program. In fact, we're considering, that it could lead to like a reciprocity with them. So if you get certified in New Hampshire, then you could use that in Vermont or vice versa. I don't think we're quite there yet. It's got to be designed, but that's it's one of the goals. And New York has a program that's a little bit different, but that's more nonprofit based rather than government based. And my understanding that there's other states as well, but I feel like I need to go check on that.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin is one of the states that does it too.
This is an opt-in
Minnesota.
program, Keith, so
It's a what?
you don't have to participate in this, you have to opt in.
It's voluntary.
It's
Right.
voluntary. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I was under the impression that we had to if it kicked off, we had to follow this program. So that's good to know.
Nope, opt in.
I guess my pressing question for the New Hampshire folks is have you guys asked any questions as far as like the contractors over there and how the program works and if it's beneficial to them?
Yes,
Okay. And how did they answer those questions? How does it work for them? Does it work okay for them? Does it benefit the actual contractor? Does it benefit the actual environment?
Yeah, so they did have a case that was litigated and ultimately went through the process, and they the contractor was not liable in the end, because of this protection that they had. And the New York program has not New York. I'm sorry, the New Hampshire program has not had. They didn't have great data about how well it's reducing. They had anecdotal data that it was helping people reduce the amount of chloride that they were spreading, but the New York program, which had a little bit more like accountability for the people who were a part of it, they had much clearer data that it was reducing the amount of salt going into the waterways.
Oh, okay. And the next question was as far as the training goes. Who would be in charge of that actual training for a commercial applicator like myself?
I don't know if anybody else wants to take that one, but I'm happy to keep answering questions.
right,
Go ahead, you're the chair.
yeah,
So we've left it right now as somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but we've gone back and forth between whether it should be a third party contractor. I mean, there are groups that do these trainings, and so the state could just contract with somebody who does provides this best management practices training, or it could be some state staff, because we have a lot of expertise in AOT, particularly on what the best management practices might be. And the most recent suggestions that we had from the Agency of Natural Resources, I think, was some kind of a combination. It sort of left it open to the possibility of having some staff, but also contracting out the work, the actual training.
And there would be a test required after the training?
Yeah, just some kind of check for understanding.
Okay. And is there an annual cost for certification?
Now, my recollection from the suggestions we got from ANR is that they wanted to go to every other year. But I think right now it's every year in the current draft.
So it's voluntary, as I found out. How would it be beneficial for somebody such as myself who owns a small business that uses this practice as far as applying the salt?
Yeah, it would if you participated in the program and you kept, records of, how you're applying the salt and everything, that you're following the best management practices or whatever, then if there was a slip and fall kind of situation, or damage related to the amount of salt for some reason, then you would have liability protection, so that you could, that you would not be liable for those damages. And yeah, and I suppose it would ideally also give you the, or any particular contractor, the assurances as to like, this is what a safe level of salt is, and so you don't need to salt any more than that, and that ideally, it helps you reduce the amount of salt that you need to spread. And that may not be the case for everybody, but that's sort of the idea. Understanding that, there's pressure to oversalt for the sake of safety.
Gotcha. How about so for right now, I know the gentleman talked about how much he pays per yard, and of course it did go up quite significantly. My hopper can hold 2 yards, which is pushing it, right? And I try to only get 1 yard at a time. $150 per yard. How about a cost basis? Would there be a cost basis to be in this program? And where would I actually have to go get this actual salt? Do you have certain sites where they're going to be stored?
No location, specific anything in there. It doesn't specify where you need to get it from. And gosh, I've lost the first part of your question. What was the first part again?
Cost basis, as far as how much it would cost.
Oh, we're anticipating that it would, to take the course, there would be some fee. We don't know what that would be yet. We're going to ask them to come back to us with a recommendation about that, and that it might be different for the initial time rather than continuing, like once you've done it for the first time, to continue on might be a different charge, but
No, I understand that. But
Yeah.
when it actually comes to me getting the salt, like let's say we get a storm, I need to get that salt that you're talking about that has the lower level of chloride.
There's nothing in here, Keith, that changes the distribution network of salt for contract operators or attempts to control the price at all. You just buy it from the same people you buy it now, and the price would be set by the market.
The salt is salt, it's got supposedly all the same chloride level. So depending on where you get it, I guess but we don't mine it in Vermont, so it comes in from outside. And if you get a chance, you'll have the time, I think it's a New Hampshire AOT Green Pro program.
Yeah.
If you want to look more into it.
Green Snow Pro, right?
Green Snow Pro, yes.
Yep. And I don't want to cut you off here, Keith, but or Mr. Williams, but we will need to move on here at some point. But if you have any further thoughts or questions, we have time for a little bit more.
I'm all set.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna particularly because this is a voluntary program. And I understand you might want to think about it some more, but I'm going to ask you the same question. Does it seem like it might be appealing to you?
I'm kind of 50-50 split right now.
Okay, that's all right.
I'm just not sure.
No, fair enough. Well, it's good to know, and really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Yes, you too. Okay. So we are moving on to, I just lost my place here.
S68 committee discussion.
68, there we go. Okay, so for this part, I wish I was there. I wish I was in person, because I would love to, like, I don't know,
We do too.
be more in it. and actually if I had been there, I was thinking like, oh, I'd love to have like a pretty like structured discussion about S68, but I'm not there, so it's gonna be slightly less formal. But here's what I was thinking. I'd love Senator Williams, if you want to just like tell us about um S68. There's 3 parts. If you just want to tell us about those 3 parts. And then I was thinking we would just go around and from our own perspective, like where are you at? What would you want to see? What are your thoughts, feelings, impressions about S68? And then we'll go from there. I do have one other round of questions that I'm gonna want to ask folks, but let's start with Senator Williams. Go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted the bill to do what we're doing, you know. That's why I did what I did on the floor Tuesday morning. The concern I've got is that I was in the legislature when this became a check back. And we all agreed that we would have a check back at the beginning of the next biennium. Well, then I found out that we couldn't do that. And I may be mistaken, unless we actually had a bill, because we're in a new biennium. So that's why it was important for me. I think we just need the people that are concerned about the Affordable Heat Act are want that to go away. And if it's, I understand from you that it's according to the PUC report, that it was not recommended that we implement that. Then we need to convince me that we don't need to do that. So I want to open it up to discussion on the committee.
So it sounds like you've already kind of just done that, which is fine. So
Okay.
let's hear from what I was hoping that you might talk about is the different sections of the bill and what they do. Um, but we can do that another time too, because there are, there's the repeal, and then there's anyway, there's some different sections. But thank you for sharing, sort of your thinking, your motivation. Like, I appreciate that. So yeah, let's continue around. Whoever would like to go next. Where are you at? What are you thinking?
Well, just, I'll
Yeah,
go.
go ahead.
I would wanna have a careful walkthrough of the bill and understand which pieces, because the requirement was that part of it doesn't go into effect unless we vote to have it go into effect. There wasn't anything requiring a vote. And so I just wanna know if we were to think about the repeal or whatever, exactly what would be repealing, which sections activate with or without the check back, and I don't really have my arms around that yet, so I want to go through it carefully and know all that before we make any kind of decisions.
I'm not sure if you can see Senator Watson, but Ellen just walked into the room.
Yes.
I don't know if she's prepared to do a walkthrough of this bill or not. She's giving me a thumbs up. I'd welcome a walkthrough of the bill. I think that.
Sure. That's Ellen, if you are prepared to do that, that is just fine. I think that's a good context.
The bill is on the website.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. S68 is an act relating to repealing the Affordable Heat Act. There's only 3 sections, it's pretty short, but it has depth to it. So the first section is a full repeal of Chapter 94 of Title 30. This is the substance of this is the chapter 94 captures of the clean heat standard statutes. It was the bulk of what was included in Act 18.
I actually met a walkthrough of the original bill, but anyway. So that we understand.
I mean,
What we're.
that
I know.
that would take a little bit longer.
Well, and I think we didn't we do something like that when the PUC
Yes.
did that joint session?
Yeah, when we had the joint session, I did go through and I had I had a slide set that you can look back at with the high points or the majority of it, boiled down that you can review. So section 1 repeals the statutory text in chapter 94. Section 2 repeals the information sharing agreement that was included that allows the PUC and the Department of Public Service to request information from the tax department regarding the fuel tax, so they can audit their fuel dealer registry. And then the third section is a very unusual provision of in a bill. So this is the abolishment of the clean heat standard positions. So it abolishes the 6 staff positions that were created under Act 18. There were 3 for the Public Utility Commission and 3 for the Department of Public Service. So this provision would terminate their employment if it was passed. This is a very unusual provision to include in a bill. We don't normally do it this way, normally, and I don't know the full repercussions of this. I don't know if any of those 6 members are part of the union. So if there was, there potentially could be some legal ramifications from that. And then other than that, it's effective on passage. So those are the 3 sections of the bill. I can talk about each of them in more depth if you'd like.
So the check back did not apply to the fuel dealer registry. Like the fuel dealer registry was not stopped.
Correct. There is a fuel dealer registry in statute. It took effect last year and has required all fuel dealers in the state, regardless of if they're specifically implicated under the Clean Heat Standard, to register with the Public Utility Commission every year.
Question,
Yes, go right ahead.
are there any other parts that, we don't do the check back, are there any other things that are not tied to the check back than the fuel dealer registry?
So the only other, I believe the only 2 things is that there remains a directive for the PUC to have a budget for the default delivery agent by September of this year. Even if they do set a budget, they won't be able to fund the default delivery agent because the rules have not yet been implemented and there's no charge being collected. So it's unclear if they'll be able to actually get anyone to agree to accept the position of default delivery agent without any funds to do that, but there is the requirement that they set a budget for the default delivery agent. There is also the directive that they establish a clean heat credit tracking system. And but again, it's more of the apparatus of how the credits themselves would be tracked, were they created under the rules.
I had assumed that with not moving forward that they could just set their budget at 0 and call it good.
I do think that is an option, yes.
Yeah. And sorry, was that it, Ellen?
I believe so.
'Cause I feel like the other part that persists is the existence of the equity advisory group and the technical advisory group.
Oh, sure. So the technical advisory group, there was no sunset included in that at all. The equity advisory group did have a sunset on it tied to when the rules were adopted. So yes, unless you adopt rules, the equity advisory group will continue. There isn't a specific mandate on how often they meet. Their initial directive was to report on the specific items listed. And I do think that you could argue that if perhaps the legislature put out a directive to the PUC to amend the proposed rules or reconfigure the rules in some way, having the equity advisory group still exist for purposes of reviewing that process and that rulemaking. So there, I do think that would be a valid use of them. But yes, there wasn't a specific, there was not a, without the rules being adopted, that group won't sunset.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Ellen, is there, as far as this fuel dealer registry? Is if somebody is a fuel dealer and they don't register, is there an enforcement mechanism, a penalty, a fine, or what happens if somebody doesn't register?
So all of the clean standard provision has the general enforcement and penalty structure that the PUC has for its other statutes. So there isn't a specific penalty outlined, but they have the authority to use their existing penalty structure for other violations of Title 30 if they were to bring enforcement against someone not complying.
Okay, is there a cost to be a fuel dealer? Is there a registration fee or
No, there's no fee to
no fee to register? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, I'm looking at chapter 94. Where is the registry in that chapter? Is it in there or is it somewhere else? Okay.
It is in 8124.
Okay.
Subsection B.
Okay. Oh, I see. Sorry. I scrolling.
Oh, I also could probably get you the original section by section summary.
That'd be great.
If you would like.
Yeah.
I don't have that on me, but I can bring that up.
Any other questions for Ellen at this point?
So it'd be fair to say as a practical matter, the part that remains that will continue to be operationalized is the registry.
That is one of, yes, that is one of the things that would be. I don't know if the PUC is taking any additional action on the credit system or seeking bids for default delivery.
I see you had a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, is the only. If we don't do the check back. The fuel dealer registry. When they register, do they just provide, say, I'm just fuel delivery and I'm in this town and I'm operating, or is there anything else they have to provide to the state as a consequence of having to register as a fuel dealer?
So at a minimum, you did require that they include their legal name, their doing business as name.
Okay.
The municipality and state where they're registered, the types of heating fuel sold, and the exact gallons of each heating fuel sold in the preceding year. They were.
The state of Vermont?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe last year's amendment did prevent that from being public information, so yes, and so the list there, the PUC maintains a list on their website of the registered fuel dealers, but it only lists their names.
Okay. Not a question for Ellen, but I wonder if we already know that in whole or in part just by the collection of the fuel tax?
So Do you want me to answer that, or do you want to answer that? Looks like you want to answer that, Ellen.
So I think the part of the reason that provision was originally included was that the tax data is kept closely confidential. And so what the tax department does have some of this information, but because convenience dealers are not a registered market like the electricity market is, the data is less readily available than that system.
But I mean, certainly we know how much taxes collected and divide by 0.02. I mean, on a statewide basis, right? We can.
Sure, I think
Yeah.
that they're. I'll stop there.
Okay, all right.
I think
Why is his hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna spot between, I'm over here.
Oh, hi.
Any discussion?
Um,
I
do
think
you
this,
sorry. I'd like to limit the conversation at the moment to just those at the table, but be happy to chat with you further later.
That's fine, thank you for considering it.
Okay. They'll put you on the list for later on. So any other questions for Ellen at this point? Okay. So we've heard from Senator Williams and Senator Bongartz. You wanted a little bit of a walkthrough. I don't know if that is sufficient, or if you want to tell us any more about how you are thinking or feeling about this. But want to give you the opportunity to keep going on your thoughts on it if you want.
No, actually, Ellen sort of gave me the information I think I was looking for in large measure.
Okay. Any thoughts from Senator Becker, Senator Hardy on where you're at with this?
Well, just a comment. I mean, it seems like, I mean, maybe I'm not reading the tea leaves right, but it seems like there's some interest in retaining the information that fuel dealers may have as far as, how much kerosene, how much number 2 propane, whatever. And if there's interest in working on a bill that retains that part of the clean heat standard, then I would have some interest in that, as a data collection tool.
Great. Senator Hardy, anything you want to add? You don't have to if you don't want to.
I am still processing, I think the section by section will be really helpful, and then I can look back at your slides that you did for that. Just to understand what it means to get rid of this entire chapter. I am interested in still getting that data. I think that's helpful. It's kind of not dissimilar to the whole conversation we had about salt.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I think having that data is really helpful. I am always in favor of sort of cleaning up the statutes for things that don't need. So I'm open to that conversation. I guess I just would want to understand the implications of what we're doing. I have really big concerns about just eliminating those 6 positions in a bill like that. That's not how we do that. And I don't think it's fair to those employees to be singled out like that in a bill. And I think I have a lot of problems with that approach to it. So yeah, I would want to not that in that way. And everyone's leaving, Anne, so.
Fair enough.
No.
Just
Thank you for taking it up.
sorry, were you saying something?
I said, thank you for taking that up.
No problem. And I know people are leaving, but I'll just have one final thought here, which is that I am also interested in retaining the data collection aspect of it. I'm open to thinking about it in different ways, as long as that data is available for use and analysis of any future legislation pertaining to the thermal sector. And I understand too that like the people who are fuel dealers, you know, that this is a largely unregulated industry, and it might be painful to either keep a registry or to become regulated in some way. And but I think that that is ultimately probably necessary. If there's better ways to collect this data, I'm open to that. So, and I agree with Senator Hardy about the positions. So that this is probably not the proper way to go about eliminating those positions. All right, so that's it for now. To be continued. Oh, Senator Williams, go ahead.
Just one more point, those positions were primarily stood up for that report. So they're not like I don't know if they're state employees or.
There's when they are state employees.
But the report is old.
Yep, and I think the proper way to go about it is probably through the budget process.
Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, and so with that, we will adjourn.